Hello everyone, and an expansive welcome to Sjenko's list of top 5 indie Metroidvania games that will keep you playing through the night. This genre is known for its large explorable worlds and progression systems, so let's take a look at some titles that are sure to grab and hook you. We kick things off with a comparatively smaller Metroidvania title in the form of SteamWorld Dig. I say smaller, but that's maybe just in scope when compared to some of its larger brethren, but SteamWorld Dig still offers up a solid gaming experience. There's actually a bit of a journey the development studio of Image & Form took to get to Dig. The studio has been around from as early as the late 90s, working on web-based games to edutainment products, even some Android and iOS games. The founders sparked to success though in the form of the first entry into the SteamWorld franchise when SteamWorld Tower Defense hit Nintendo DS in 2010. Image & Form knew they'd hit gold, and a very distinct universe was born. Exploring this creative sandbox to its fullest, the devs had taken SteamWorld from medieval times right through into space. But the era they chose to focus on in Dig was the gold prospecting frontiers of the Wild West. In the role of Rusty, the steam-powered robot, you will receive the deed to your uncle's mine, only to discover that the uncle was deceased. And so begins an adventure to explore deeper into your newly claimed mine, helping the topside town of Templeton grow while uncovering the mysteries of the unknown depths. A very specific area one can point out that truly sets SteamWorld Dig apart from its Metroidvania siblings is in its level design. To those old school gamers out there, some Dig Dug comparisons will come to mind immediately. And this might seem like an odd choice for a platformer game, but I must tip my hat at the devs for incorporating these elements into the game so naturally. Armed with his trusty pickaxe, Rusty will dig his way deeper into the mine, clearing rocks, collecting gems to go sell off in town, or battling the many enemies you find along the way. It's crazy to consider how your digging flows into the platforming side of the game. Whereas most Metroidvanias have the levels carefully laid out for you to explore, in SteamWorld Dig you become the architect of your own platforming. You'll have to plan ahead and dig in such a way to allow easy access for yourself. One wrong move and you might crush valuable gems underneath a falling rock. This becomes especially tricky when many of your foes have attacks that can destroy the soil around them, causing your cautiously laid routes to get demolished. It makes for some interesting gameplay and adds new sorts of dynamics to the platforming formula. I must say, the game isn't exactly difficult. There are challenge rooms with puzzle elements to spice things up, but when compared to some of the other titles on this list, it might put the more hardcore players looking to truly challenge themselves off from giving it a try. All things considered, SteamWorld Dig is a great introductory platformer, and beyond that, the digging mechanics coupled with the Metroidvania style progression systems comes together in a very promising way. I can't wait to see what new things these devs will have on offer in the future, as they're far from done with the SteamWorld universe. To anyone willing to give Dig a try though, they'll find a solid game in this one, as well as its sequel that's sure to keep them entertained for many hours. Getting a full grasp of a title like Ori and the Blind Forest is a bit of a daunting task. This is the sort of game that's been a contender in Metroidvania conversations ever since its release. It's among the few games with overwhelmingly positive reviews from tens of thousands of players, and even for me personally it's something special. It was the first game I streamed over on Twitch, which was an amazing experience. So if that is obvious, why it would earn its place on just about any list. If you haven't played it, or maybe it's just the first time you've heard about Ori and the Blind Forest, you're in for an amazing ride. I can honestly say I envy you, as I'd love to experience this phenomenal game again as a fresh experience. A noteworthy aspect of the game's development lies in the team behind it. Moon Studios isn't exactly fixed in a single location, but is actually made up of members located all around the globe. One of its lead members being a former Blizzard artist who sought to explore more creative avenues by way of making independent games. With so much diversity and talent behind the scenes, it's easy to see why Ori was such a huge success. With an artist being one of the people at the helm, it's little surprise how exquisite the game looks. Right from the get-go you'll be greeted with some of the most stunning visuals for you to feast your eyes on, and it's incredible how much the graphics add to the moods of the different environments, and how much of the storytelling and emotions are so effectively conveyed to the player. Let's focus on story and emotion for a bit. The game comes out the gate strong, eager to get in some gut punches right away to set the tone, and it needs to be said, I count myself among those who had some tears in their eyes at points throughout the game. It might not hit everyone the same, but even to the iron-hearted among us, the journey should be worth the while. You guide Ori on an adventure to bring life to the forest of Nibel after a catastrophic event is causing it to slowly wither and die. Returning balance to the forest means restoring light to the elements. This is where the gameplay comes in, and controlling Ori is a blissful endeavor. The controls are smooth and responsive, which is essential as the game throws some truly intense moments at you. If your reflexes aren't razor fast, you'll be doing some sections over and over. Just ask me, I can tell you from my own personal struggle. There are the usual exploration skills, with some that'll grant you passage to new areas, but what I love is how the game tangles many of its abilities together. It incorporates harrowing ways of stacking these, so you'll need to juggle between everything you've learned in order to get through some of the later game puzzle sections. And you'll be dying a lot. In fact, I made a compilation video of all of my deaths, so you'll be able to laugh and judge your way through the many deaths that I had. Oh, I jumped into the spider. Keep on jumping into the things. Is that a... Okay. There's something to be said when a game rises to prominence the way Ori and the Blind Forest has. As a Metroidvania, it has all of the needed bells and whistles in place, but most importantly, it's in the way it executes the flow of its levels, the gameplay that'll grow in complexity, and on top of that, some good storytelling that meshes with beautiful graphics and excellent music. If you've played Ori and the Blind Forest, you've probably fallen in love with it, or at the very least, you'd consider it an enjoyable game. If you're like me and arrive late to the party, then I can highly recommend the game, as it's guaranteed to be an intensely fulfilling experience. Over the years, horror games have enjoyed a constant presence in the gaming market. Ever since first introduced, these sort of spine chillers haven't fallen out of fashion. While survival horror remains the staple food to keep horror junkies sated, it's always amazed me just how creative developers can be when bleeding horror into all sorts of genres. Carrion is just such an addition to Metroidvanias, or to an extent it's reverse horror survival, as you play the monstrosity that everyone's running away from. Brought to us by a Polish developer, the suitably named Phobia Game Studio. The most prominent feature is just how retro it looks, like an old SNES game that's recently received some remaster polish. It fits in so well with that good old style and displays in well with the vibe of the game. The atmosphere itself drips off good old school monster movie feels, so you can't help but imagine yourself acting out a horror B-movie, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like I said, here you get to be the monster, some sort of eldritch abomination ripped right from the scope of Lovecraft, the likes of which will make Cthulhu tear up with pride. You basically start off in newborn form, breaking out of your containment and salivating from your mini mouth to slam and chomp your way to revenge. The way scientists flee and quiver with fear just adds to the ferocity of it all, especially when you take into account that these terrified folks serve as bona fide health packs, and you'll be using them on the regular to keep yourself nice and healthy. Along the way you'll also find DNA samples that'll unlock new powers and will make you grow stronger, also literally making you grow in actual size. By the end, your monstrosity will become quite huge, equaling the size and growth of any enemy out there, and you will need that in order to take on some of the tougher foes. Sad to say, there are no boss fights in the game. I would have liked to have seen what clever mechanics the devs could have cooked up in a big multi-layered boss battle. Even so, some of the later stages in Carrion can provide quite a bit of a challenge to get through. The puzzle areas are most notable in this regard. This is the part where Carrion evolves to display its own brand of mechanics. As you grow in mass, your flourishing beastie will unlock new abilities for you to use both in combat as well as exploration. As is to be expected in most Metroidvanias, early on there will be sections of levels that are blocked off, which you'll be able to access later on. It might sound par for the course in this genre, however, it is important to take note of this as Carrion throws an interesting twist in how you go about achieving this. Your burgeoning monster will have specific stages in its evolution, each stage having its own set of abilities. The larger shape will present you an arsenal of heavy attacks, such as a body slam to destroy obstacles or smashing into your enemies. Meanwhile, your smaller form will lean more towards a cautious approach, such as a stealth mode to evade motion sensors or even to outright avoid enemies. How this plays into gameplay is at certain points in levels you'll be able to shed your mass to take on your smaller form. This creates sections where you need to think before you can proceed and truly some fun gameplay elements. Sadly though, without larger challenging battles, Carrion doesn't exactly push you to your limits, and I honestly hope they bring out a sequel where you need to employ mechanics in creative ways to take down a big bad. As for the game as it stands, there are a bevy of enemies to kill, and some will certainly lay down the pain. With lots of great gameplay and new interesting twists and turns added to the normal formula, I can honestly recommend Carrion as a worthwhile experience. When taking on a game like Hollow Knight, there is certainly its highly regarded reputation that one has to consider. For one, there is its story with thoughtful characters and some interesting plot developments that is fondly cherished by its avid fandom. Secondly though, and perhaps what it's mostly known for, is the challenging brutality that stands as the core of the game. For a game that became such a milestone in the evolution of Metroidvanias, it's strange to consider the low point that had led to its birth. During a Game Jam event back in 2013, two of the game's developers had worked together to create Hungry Knight, a small survivalish title where the titular knight slays bugs in order to fill a starvation meter. Hungry Knight was very poorly received, but looking at it now, what sticks out is the familiar style and aesthetic of the bug characters. The concept that grew into Hollow Knight took inspirations from a number of titles such as Mega Man, Zelda and Xanadu. These all added bits and pieces to contribute in the making of a gigantic world in the form of Hollow Nest. Jumping off from a Kickstarter campaign that flew past its goal, this proved to be just a giant boost of confidence Team Cherry needed. Now they knew they had something great on their hands with a lot of potential. In early 2017, a salivating public finally got their hands on Hollow Knight. The overly positive reviews came flooding in, with the Switch and Xbox versions garnering even more praise. Going from the poorly received initial creation to a fully fledged mammoth of a world, Team Cherry had created a sprawling masterpiece that had finally earned them the praise that they deserved. When talking about Hollow Knight though, sprawling is definitely a fitting description. The Kingdom of Hollowness is a gigantic underworld ecosphere filled with tons of bugs and nasties that will claw you to shreds in seconds. This is what you love when it comes to the biomes. Here it's not so much snowy wastes or arid deserts. In Hollow Knight it's all subterranean, and still they manage to breathe so much life and variety into the setting. From the greenery of Greenpath to the vibrant mining operations in Crystal Peak, through to the utter gloominess of Deep Nest, every ecosystem fit right in and has a story to tell. Which is to say, the tragic tale of a kingdom fallen into ruin and despair, reduced to a shadow of its former glory. Its citizens infected and faded into obscurity, or even worse. You'll explore a somber tale through dialogues and lore pieces throughout the land. Your journey will lead you to meet many fascinating characters, many of them in the form of difficult foes, and none of them as prominent as the bosses you'll face. This is where Hollow Knight lives up to its status as one of those toughest nails games that you just have to experience for yourself. Every fight is a memorable one. Some bosses die easy enough, but some of the harder ones will come down on you like a sledgehammer. After many retries and obscene outbursts, in victory you look back in triumphant glory, feeling like you've grown and pushed yourself to the limits. Taking into account how these boss battles were constructed and how well they fit into the world, you can admire how masterfully crafted Hollow Knight is. With an overarching storyline and how the characters fit into this lusciously grime of a world, with the many enemies and the heartbreaking backstories your allies and even your enemies share, you'll understand where the passion for this franchise comes from. If you're one of the few still on the outside looking in, and if you feel brave enough, there's a brilliant game here just waiting to be explored. I stepped into Dead Cells knowing that very much in the same vein as Ori and Hollow Knight, there's an ardent fan base here that live and die by this game. What set this game apart for me though was how it plunged headfirst into the bloody screams and tears of another genre that I wholeheartedly love, the genre of roguelites. I knew this game was made for me. Dating all the way back to 2001, the developers over at Motion Twin slaved away on many a mobile and browser game. While in the planning stages of a sequel to their browser-based tower defense title Die Tonight, an interesting evolution shaped one idea into something utterly different. They found that the sequel they were working on, with the original Die Tonight being a cooperative game, the new ideas just weren't shaping up to be fun for testers. So they decided to turn the whole thing into a single player experience. The developers slowly hacked away at it, eventually even removing the tower defense aspect until they ultimately decided to convert it into an action platformer. When Dead Cells launched into early access, it only contained about 30 to 40% of the finished game. Even so, Motion Twin knew they had to put out a great product that was polished and fun with enough bells and whistles to impress the player base. Impress players it certainly did, and the rest is history. When actually getting into the nitty-gritty of Dead Cells, saying you'll live and die by it is quite a fitting mantra as you live, die and relive it many times over. There certainly is a whole lot of dying to be had in Metroidvanias, that much is true, but being a roguelite means something a little different than respawning from a save point a few steps away from where you were. At the start of each run you'll be boiled down to a blank slate with only a choice of melee, range and a shield to pick up. Throughout the levels you'll be able to pick up gear and build your character as you progress through the many areas. As you defeat bosses, they'll give you runes, as in the usual Metroidvania fashion, these will unlock paths into new biomes. What really impressed me here were the looks and sounds of the levels. They are spectacular. From the level of Slumbering Sanctuary, awakening halfway through with enemies galore, right through to the hazardous platforms being surrounded by beautiful vistas in the fractured shrines. Each level and their enemies feel quite unique, so that each time you enter a new area I felt utterly useless before I began to discover its ways. Learning to play the game is by far one of Dead Cells' most fun aspects. With more than 100 pieces of gear, you'll find thousands of possible strategies as you can mix and match which items to group up and see what works well together. The longer I played, it steadily blew my mind to think how many combinations and options I've only tried, but also the strategies I haven't even stumbled on. The amount of gear and nuances is crazy, and a fact that makes Dead Cells such a compelling game. With every run, you'll discover something new. The boss battles also stand out as definite high points throughout the game. Some of these get truly creative and go out of their way to test your builds and skills. What I loved about them was the unique designs and special flavor that went into their levels and how the mechanics functioned. You can see the devs took painstaking care in how these were built and how well their styles fit in with the levels that came before. You'll easily find every boss fight quite memorable. Then with every new run, as a boss dies easier, you'll be able to admire how much you've grown and improved. There's a ton that can be said about Dead Cells. One can certainly talk hours about build variety and tactics. Many hours into the game, I still learn new things and I cringe at the multitude of mistakes I made. But that is a huge part of the game's appeal. Even at this moment, there are still new content updates coming out, and Motion Twin seems far from being done. If like me you love the large open spaces and exploration Metroidvania games have on offer, but also the randomization aspects that come with roguelites, the way Dead Cells marries these two so effortlessly should absolutely grab your attention. Even if these two genres seem an odd combination to you, if you give this Roguevania a try, you'll find a game that'll keep you playing for years to come. And so ends a list of 5 great Metroidvania games, each of them offering their own take on this mammoth of a genre. These are just some of my picks though. Are there any Metroidvania titles you feel stand out among the crowd? Comment down below and maybe I'll give myself and others some new titles to check out. Like the video to show the channel your support and subscribe for more top 5 videos, as well as classic and indie gameplay and recommended titles worth playing. Thank you for watching, keep on gaming, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one.